Good morning. Welcome to Morning Manna. My name is Bruce Turner, and today is Wednesday, July the 5th, 2017, and this is episode 2550. Welcome. So glad that you could be with us this morning. This morning, I'm going to share some scripture with you, and we're going to talk about something that I think is really, really important. How do you relay your faith? How do you live out your faith in a social media world? And let me tell you something. I know from personal experience how challenging that can be. And so let me share with you some scripture this morning, and I want you to maybe jot these down and look at them later and think about some things that I'm going to share with you today and see what kind of a difference it might make in your life. Romans chapter 12 in verse 18 says something really important and challenging. Are you ready? If it is possible, as much as depends on you, live peaceably with all men. Now, if it is possible, we know Philippians says, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. So we know it's possible. So it's a given. If it is possible, and it is, as much as depends on you, live peaceably with all men. As much as depends on you. Now, listen, there are other people who are saying things and postulating things and positioning themselves in areas that can be, quite honestly, very challenging. I'm 66 years old. I grew up in a different area. Hey, let me just say, the elementary school I went to didn't have air conditioning. The house that we lived in Miami didn't have air conditioning. I remember the first air conditioner. My parents bought a window unit, and they put it in their bedroom. I don't know why they didn't put it in my bedroom, but they put it in their bedroom. Oh, I can remember how many times we would open my mom and dad's bedroom door while they were out to work and just bask in the coolness of the air conditioning. Where I was here yesterday, the effective temperature, feels like temperature, was 104 degrees. I grew up in a time when prayer was a regular thing in school. But anyway, there's a lot of angst, a lot of anxiety, a lot of fighting and posturing that's taking place in social media. And I want to give you some tips that I think will be able to help you with that. But first, just remember that scripture. As much as depends on you, live peaceably with all men. Make sure that you're doing your part, regardless of what others are doing. And sometimes you just have to resist the temptation to post something in social media. It's just like with email. Sometimes you get an email and you copy out an email, a response, a reply. You need to read that reply before you click the send button, right? How many times have you sent an email that you wish you could recall? Here's another one, Colossians chapter 4 and verse 6. Let your conversation be always full of grace, seasoned with salt, so that you may know how to answer everyone. Sometimes an answer is necessary. Sometimes an answer is needed. So if you're going to answer, if you're going to reply, if you're going to post a tweet, a comment on Facebook, make sure that you're full of grace. Make sure that you're seasoned with salt. That simply means that your conversation is going to be in good taste when you answer people. I love what Jesus said in Mark chapter 9 and verse 50. Salt is good. And you know, the scripture says that we, believers, the church, are the salt of the earth. That's what scripture says. I didn't say that. God said that. You and I are the salt of the earth. And Jesus said salt is good. But if it loses its saltiness, with what will you season it? Have salt among yourselves and be at peace with one another. Have salt among yourselves. Forget the rest of the world right now. Have salt among yourselves, Jesus said to the disciples, and be at peace with everyone. In Ephesians chapter 4 and verse 29, we read, let no unwholesome talk come out of your mouths, but only what is helpful for building up the one in need and bringing grace to those who listen. Let me read that again. Let no unwholesome talk come out of your mouths, but only what is helpful for building up the one in need and bringing grace to those who listen. So if you're going to comment, if you're going to tweet, if you're going to engage on any subject in social media, you need to make certain that whatever comes out of your mouth or off your fingertips on the keyboard, you need to make sure that it meets this criteria. First of all, it's helpful. It's helpful, not hurtful. And then that it's helpful for building up the one in need. Building up, not tearing down. Edification, not condemnation. And then bringing grace to those who listen. Now, listen, not everybody listens, right? Not everybody listens. And if they don't listen, there's not a whole lot that you can do about that. Don't allow yourself to get frustrated over that. But make sure you're bringing grace so that those who listen can listen and hear. Jesus said, he that has ears, let him hear. You know, you can have ears and not be able to hear. Are you with me? One last verse, and then I want to give you 3 important points. 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 15. But in your hearts, sanctify Christ as Lord. Always be prepared to articulate a defense to everyone who asks you to give the reason for the hope that you have, but respond with gentleness and respect. It's a crazy day we live in. The world has totally redefined the definition of the word tolerance. Tolerance used to mean that you had mutual respect for everybody else to have an opinion that might be different than yours. But no, today tolerance means that every opinion is valid and you need to give as much support to somebody else's opinion as you would give to your own. That's not what tolerance used to mean. But listen, important things in this verse, and the first one is this: sanctify Christ as Lord. You need to make sure that you're in right position with your relationship with Christ. And then always be prepared to articulate a defense. Now, let me ask you this question. Are you prepared today to articulate a defense to someone who might ask you a reason for the hope that is in you? If not, why not? What are some things that you can do to be prepared? Well, there's some really simple things you can do. The first thing that comes to my mind is read Josh McDowell's Evidence That Demands a Verdict, and then go ahead and read his second book, the follow-up, More Evidence That Demands a Verdict. Make sure that you understand Scripture. Make sure that you're aware. Don't be like the ostrich who has your head in the sand. I know sometimes you just want to avoid all this mess. You just want to pretend it's not going on. And I realize not all of us are called to be apologists, but all of us are to sanctify Christ as Lord. All of us are to be prepared to articulate a defense. And then this thing, but respond with gentleness and respect. Gentleness and respect doesn't seem to be what characterizes a lot of what I see in social media. And in particular, I'm talking to believers. I've got some friends that, man, they just post multiple times during the day, and I'm not going to say what they should or should not do. I've got friends, people that I went to college with, acquaintances from over the year. I've even got family members who post things that I don't necessarily disagree with, but I want everybody to know that I love them and that I respect them. I don't want to do anything on social media that will keep me from being able to have a conversation, a gracious conversation to those who would listen. So now here are 3 things. I learned these from a dear, dear friend, Tony Meggs. He said this. He said, there are 3 things that are important. 1 is your position. Secondly, your practice. And 3rd, your posture. Now, all of us have a position on things. I have a position that I believe life is precious. I believe in the sanctity of life. I believe in protecting the unborn. I believe that life begins at conception. That's my position. Now, you may disagree with that position, and that's okay. But then there's my practice. That is, how is my everyday life reflect upon what I say I believe? You want to make certain that your practice coincides with your position. Otherwise, you'll just be recognized as a hypocrite. But here's the most important thing that I want you to get out of today's podcast, and that is your posture. Regardless of what your position is, regardless of whether or not your practice coincides with your position, what is your posture? How do people perceive you? Is your conversation in good taste, seasoned with salt? Is your conversation full of grace? Is your conversation focused on being helpful and building up, bringing grace? Is your conversation with gentleness and respect? Those are some things that I think would be good for us to think about today, don't you? Thanks for joining me today for this episode of Morning Manna. MorningManna.com will take you to our Facebook group page where you can respond and comment, and we can have some conversation there. If you have any questions, you can email me at bruceturner@gmail.com. Love to have you engage in that way. So until tomorrow morning, this is Bruce reminding you to choose joy.